Hello and welcome to the September 1st edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I'm Mike Hogan, here with, still in Saratoga, Peter Thomas Fornatel. Welcome, Pete.
Welcome to you, sir. Thanks for doing such an intrepid and excellent job of hosting the podcast all summer. I guess we'll do one more with me up here. I'll then be back in the studio next week, hopefully, God willing, and the creek don't rise. And but then shortly thereafter, departing again, leaving hosting duties to you and hopefully Matt Bernier, who'll be joining us again in September. But I think you've done a great job all summer, keeping things moving, dealing with some strange technical issues and some very exciting racing. So kudos to you, sir.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, it's been fun. It's been a while since I've hosted. I got to go back to my college radio days. You know, so it's a little rusty, but you know, it's been fun. But it'll be good to see you. Well, thank you, thank you. It'll be good to see you in the flesh again, if only for maybe a week or two. How many weeks do? Yeah,
I'm going to be the Daily Racing Form unofficial UK correspondent for a few months. In truth, I'm not going to be that at all. I'm going to be doing my regular beat, but doing it from London. I'm 90% sure we should be able to get this technology up and working for me to continue to be on the pod at least once a week while I'm over there. I am expecting to have some good stuff for the Breeders' Cup from talking to my friends who work in English racing and also doing a lot of work myself, going out to the courses and talking to people and seeing some of these horses in the flesh who are going to be shipping over. So it should be a lot of fun. And it's not a vacation. It's a work thing, but it's more a work thing for my wife, Susan, where Daily Racing Form has sort of graciously allowed me to work it into my life. And you'll still be seeing my name a lot in the paper, and I'll be here. I'll just be a bit farther away.
Yeah, well, it's good. I mean, you know, I'm glad we'll still have as much interaction, or hopefully as much interaction as we have. And you know, it'll be nice to have Matt Bernier back. We'll kind of get the team back together, even if you're still going to be remote.
I think it's going to be great, and I'm just so excited. It makes me just appreciate technology. I remember being over there in 1994. Back then, I was a big New York Knicks fan. I have to admit that fan-love relationship hasn't maintained the way that my deep and abiding love of the Mets and the Giants has. But back then, I was a huge Knicks fan, and they were in the NBA Finals, of course, in 1994. And being over there, you struggled to even get a result. And I can remember specifically after Game 7 against the Rockets, walking a mile to find a newsstand that would have a paper that might have it, and just seeing the one line in agate type in the back, whatever it was, Rockets 82, Knicks 78, and my heart sinking like a stone. But these days, if I were over there, I'd be watching the full game online. You know, you don't miss a beat, and I intend not to miss a beat while I'm over there in terms of following all the stakes races happening here, and of course trying to pay attention to what's going on over there. I think I'm going to be almost monomaniacally focused on the Breeders' Cup from the minute Saratoga ends, really trying to dig even deeper than usual on those races, and hopefully I can share some good thoughts in the podcast. And between the three of us, not sure if we can promise giving out another 60-1 winner at the Breeders' Cup like you did last year, but hopefully we can give the people something to hang their hat on.
I don't know if I'll have another 60-1 winner in the Breeders' Cup in my lifetime. So, you know, unless our Kang runs again.
The ghost of our Kang.
The ghost of our Kang. So, speaking of the Breeders' Cup, we've got a lot of good races that happened over the weekend that will probably set the stage for a lot of racing that's going to happen in about 2 months in the Breeders' Cup. I don't know where we want to start. Obviously, the lead story. You want to start with the lead? You want to bury it a little? You want to lead up to it? No, you were there, so you tell me.
I think I don't even want to talk about anything else. I mean, we can, and I'll tell you what I thought, but I mean, it's all inconsequential because we saw a horse race that they'll be talking about in 50 years, 80 years, 100 years on Saturday. And I almost like the idea. I mean, heck, let's talk about that for as long as we want to, and then if we get to the other stuff, we get to the other stuff. But if nothing else, I mean, this could almost be the evergreen Travers 2015 pod in terms of dissecting what happened on the racetrack that day, because I just think it was the most devastating race I've ever seen in a lot of ways, but it was also super duper cool and one of the best. So it's, you know, I could go on and on. So that's where I think we should begin.
I agree. I mean, and you know, I'm kind of right there with you, because it was obviously disappointing for a number of reasons, not just from a betting standpoint, but also, you know, just from a fan standpoint. But at the same time, I feel like American Pharoah lost absolutely nothing in defeat, and maybe even stamped his greatness even further in losing the way he did. Because
totally fair.
I thought at the top of the lane and on the turn, he was beat by Frosted. And
he was going to be fourth.
He was going to be third or fourth, yeah. And not only did he dig in, re-rally, put Frosted away by a couple lengths, he ran on very gamely for setting some really, really tiring intermediate fractions, you know, only to get caught late by a very good horse, you know, a horse who's been improving and certainly has done little wrong in the last few months. So I thought it was an amazing race. You know, my cousin was at the track, who's not, you know, he's a fan of horse racing. He's not really one that follows racing all that regularly. You know, he texted me right afterwards and he said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "He ran absolutely huge. You know, it's a little disappointing, but you can't take anything away from the performance of American Pharoah."
Yeah, it was phenomenal, and I agree with you. I mean, I think I want to say he gained something in defeat. Now, what I think he gained is the respect of a lot of people out there who don't necessarily respond only to horses who win easily. If you follow what I'm saying, I mean, he'd in the past, to me, he'd overcome a certain amount of adverse circumstances, especially in a race like the Haskell, where just in theory that was not an easy setup, because you have speed inside, legitimate speed inside, solid speed outside, and the way he did it just so easily, you know, cruising in, obviously to me was incredibly impressive. But to see him in a real fight, the way that he had to, you know, I mean, he basically broke Frosted in half, and despite very aggressive riding tactics, and we'll get to that in a bit, but it showed a new level of grit, I think, that I do think in the minds of some people who had sort of doubted him or doubted the competition or whatever, did prove that he had another gear. Now that said, and this is maybe a good second point to discuss in the American Pharoah conversation, I do not believe that was the American Pharoah. I think that quote that I think both that Espinosa and Baffert have both essentially given is correct. I think we saw an effort. You know, yes, it was 27 days, and this is a horse who'd shown he could come back quick and run races on top of each other during the Triple Crown. But after having the 4 huge efforts between the Triple Crown races and the Haskell, I think coming back with another ship across country, he just visually didn't seem to me in the running of the race like the same horse. Maybe a little bit lighter physically, but not so much that as I just feel like the Pharoah that we saw at the Haskell even would have run away from Frosted a bit more and put that field on the stretch a bit more and drawn off and won. I mean, I just don't think that was the best that American Pharoah could be. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, he might have taken a step back for whatever reasons. You know, I'm not going to speculate whether it was the travel or the number of races or whatever. I mean, regardless, I'm not even going to use the word bounce, because, you know, sometimes horses run peak efforts, and sometimes, you know, they maybe run their 90 or 95% effort. And I would agree. I don't think that's the best we've seen of American Pharoah. I don't think that's even, you know, a sign that he's regressing. And certainly you look towards those kinds of efforts, especially if you can make a case that the horse was maybe not in peak form. Those are the kinds of efforts you build off of. And, you know, setting those kinds of fractions, especially in I think it was really the second half of the race, or second half mile,
for sure.
rather.
Yeah, the first half was not fast. And I think a lot of people had a knee-jerk reaction. Really smart people, with Randy Moss on TV, talked about how slow the half mile was.
Right.
And I know mathematically it's a little bit up in the air. I'm with you. I think it was taxing. I think the 46 and 3 second half, I think a mile 35 to the mile, a minute 35 to the mile, it was a little too much given everything that was going on, despite what we'd seen from this horse previously. It is interesting to note, though, that some observers, I mentioned what Randy said on TV, I don't know if he still feels that way a few days later, but in racing flow terms, it came up neutral, to be honest. And I think what that might be reflective of is they don't run that many 10 furlong races at Saratoga, and the way those fractions played out were very unusual. So I wonder if there isn't something in the data. I actually asked Jake Jacobs about it, because to me, he seemed like a clear flow upgrade. For us, it seemed like a clear flow upgrade. And the winner, Keen Ice, who I guess we have to talk to a little bit more at some point too, was the perfect trip winner. The flow numbers, just to cite some math here, they didn't necessarily see it that way. They saw it as more honest. But no, I'm of the belief that's not how I see it, though. I think those, like you nailed it, the internal fractions, and also, as we've talked about before, and it gets thrown around the track a lot of the time, it's not just the physical time you're running, it's how it's going down. And when you have a legitimate opponent breathing down your neck and pressing you, that's not easily going. You know, that half mile, that mile fraction, you know, it was earned. He ran almost every step.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you completely. And, you know, you mentioned Keen Ice, and I think he's a really good horse who is certainly on the improve, and he's one that you probably don't want to underestimate, even though I agree, of the two, American Pharoah and Keen Ice, just from a handicapping standpoint, when you see these kinds of races, when you see the way that they're run, there's one type that you're looking to bet forward, and there's one type that you're looking to downgrade. But I think everyone's going to be thinking that, and you may still get that big disparity in odds between the two of them. And yeah, I think American Pharoah is the better horse on any given day, is likely to beat Keen Ice, but we've already seen it. Keen Ice, if he puts in a top effort and he gets the kind of race flow that benefits his running style, he is absolutely live in a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would end up using him, just because that field is going to be so loaded. But you're absolutely right. At the right, I say that now.
You're right.
But then if the numbers are staring you in the face,
you know,
right.
It could be 30 to 1.
That's a good point.
You know,
that's a good
because
point.
Everyone's going to be you know, Pharoah ran the better race. Plus, you've got Honor Code, who's probably the better closer. You know, I mean, it was the same logic here, and it's why I threw him from. I was alive to 4 horses in the pick 4, not Keen Ice, because I thought, okay, if it's going to be a closer, Texas Red's probably the better closer. You know, if it's going to be a new shooter, you know, it might be someone like Smart Transition. And I was overthinking it instead of thinking, okay, this is a good horse who's fought every fight and is always a little undervalued.
Yeah, hit the board, and I mean, hit the board at Monmouth. I mean, obviously the margin there didn't tell the tale of how much better Pharoah was, but he's still right. Somebody had to run second, and he did. The Belmont obviously ran well, and I mean, we both talked about, and Matt Bernier as well. He ran sneaky well, staying on late a little bit in the Derby. He was on a decent figure pattern. I figured he'd be too far back, and yeah, there might be a better closer. In the end, in my betting, I just went stone cold on the end. I just didn't, even in the morning somebody said, Peter, are you going to bet against this horse? And I did say sort of my gut instinct was, yeah, I'll probably put 20% of my play against him because there'd be so much value there. And I figured he was about 80% to win. So just mathematically, that was my idea. In the end, I constructed the ticket. I loved the way it looked. And I didn't do that. And it's funny, it gets back to to talk about my betting for a minute, because it relates directly to the webinar we did last week. I have to say I've been blown away and very happy with all the nice things people have said to us on Twitter and over email about the webinar we did with Jonathan Kinchin about Ticketmaker last week. If folks haven't seen it and you have any interest at all in the topic, I think you should check it out, because I've just never seen, people always say some nice stuff, right, when we do these projects, but this one really seems to have caught people. And I basically took the ticket that we discussed on there that Jonathan was playing for the pick 4 and turned it into a pick 6 and left Pharoah stone cold on the end, and basically was sitting there with the pick 6 on the line. And that's part of the disappointment, certainly. But I have to say that, call me crazy, you could keep the money. I'd have rather seen the horse win.
Well, yeah. Well, if you'd been used some of that 20% to cover a horse like Keen Ice, you just scooped the whole pool, because we.
I couldn't have done it. Of course, I went back and looked at it. I was shocked that Keen Ice wasn't covered in the pick 6. It would have. In the pick 6 iteration, it simply would have cost too much. Yeah, absolutely no reason I shouldn't have had a little backup in the pick 4. That was probably, though, it's one of those things. I don't know. Was it bad betting? Yeah, probably. But was it also just, succumbing to sort of the excitement of the day and the weekend, and what an amazing experience it was to have American Pharoah here? I still think, maybe if he ran a bad 4th, the way it looked like he might there for about half a second, maybe we wouldn't look back at it the same way. But to have a great champion who had no reason really to run here other than sport, as far as I know, not familiar with the specifics of the Coolmore deal. I've heard people say it was greedy. I don't see that at all. No. I think it was sporting. And was it the smartest thing they could have done from purely a manage the horse finances point of view? No, probably not. But was it a great thing for the sport? And is it the thing they could do that people would be talking about for decades? It sure was. Yeah. And the way the race played out only underlines that. And, applause, with one caveat, applause to the connections and the way that they've handled themselves throughout the whole thing. Particularly Baffert, I thought, was very, very gracious in defeat.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, I think it's a case where, look, they've got a horse who he's a champion. He's already a champion. He's going to be a double champion. He's the first Triple Crown winner in 37 years. They've got this racehorse. They want to see him race. They want to allow the public to see him race. And you're right, perhaps the most prudent thing to do might be to manage the career a little bit more conservatively. But I love that they were wanting to take a shot, that they wanted to share this horse with us, let you have a chance to see him in person, let so many other people have a chance to see him in person, let us all see him race more, because too often we've had horses be retired right after big efforts because they just are so valuable in breeding, and so it's great that we have a great racehorse, and I will use the word great in this sense, and we're able to see him continue to race.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff, and it's a weekend I'll never forget. I would have loved to have changed that last hour a little bit, but it was a great Travers Day. I'm still a little stunned, I have to say. I went over there on Sunday. I haven't been able to look at a form since. I haven't handicapped a race. I went over and it was socializing, and it was a little bit I don't want to say funereal, but it was a little bit it was a little bit like a wake, just how mellow it was, and people just sort of retelling these stories. And yesterday I couldn't look at all. I think I'm going to get back on for tomorrow. My friend Brian Nadeau and I, once a year, do a thing we call the Degenerate Doubleheader that I don't know if I've ever talked about on the podcast or not, where we do the whole day on the flat. We'll probably go to Pinnell's for dinner in between, and then head over to the harness track for the night. That kind of like pure fun, channeling the inner degenerate might be the kind of thing that gets me back into it. Because just from a wagering point of view and just an emotional point of view, I mean, it felt like, I mean, for me, the sports example that comes to mind is 2006 Game 7 of the LCS, when I sat behind home plate and saw Adam Wainwright throw the best pitch I've ever seen, and it just froze Beltran, and that was it. The Mets, who seemed so faded to be able to win that game and go on to the World Series, that was it. You felt it. You were so close to it happening that you felt what it would feel like if it actually happened, and the balloon burst. And so I'm already now, a couple of days later, I'm still in a funk, but I'm past the point in the funk where now I'm at least being able to see the future and see what it's going to look back at, to think about that day and the weekend. And I realize that it's going to be pretty awesome, and I'm going to be really, really happy I was there, despite my posture after the race. It was one of those things where he spurts away. When he broke Frosted in half and he spurts away, there was the minute where you could start cheering. And then there was the second. I had a 1 second thing of, obviously saw Keen Ice, but it was like, maybe not fully respecting him as much as I should have, or just knowing that he was a 1 for 10 horse, thinking, okay, he can hang and we can get this thing. And then he switched leads, and I felt my knees go weak, and then I felt my knees go weaker, and the next thing I knew, my butt was on the floor. And I was just looking up at the TV, a crumpled and broken man. Oh. But and I'm glad I was up in the what we call the secret spot over above Shake Shack for the day. I wished I'd been in the grandstand. Not only because in the grandstand it would have been I'm sure it just would have been amazing. Probably even would have been worse in the end, I guess. But would have been amazing to be there and feel that energy. But I love that they applauded the horse when he came back. I thought that was. I remember I wasn't a big brown guy or whatever, but like I definitely thought it was wrong when people at Belmont that they booed the horse or when he came back. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And the fact that all those people there still appreciated what that horse had given and what he's done, I wished I had been there to cheer him walking back, because it was just a tremendous effort. This is what we want in our racehorses. And like I said, even though I was thrilled they came here, I fully recognize if it was my job to call the shots, maybe that's not how it would have gone down. But I'm glad it wasn't me calling the shots, because it was great to see. And I'm excited to see what happens next. But before we talk about that, why don't we loop back and talk for a second about, I alluded to the lack of sportsmanship that I saw on display. And I would like to nominate for the let's call it the Steve Coburn Award for being a lousy sport. Let's just give it right now to Victor Espinoza. What do you think?
Yeah, I didn't see the comments. I heard a little bit after the fact, and I watched some of the replays to try and see if I could see what he was talking about. And what I guess what I'm referring to is, he was claiming that Jose Lezcano hit American Pharoah a number of times with his whip. Is that what you were referring to as well?
The quote in the paper was that he tried to hurt American Pharoah, which I think is a very manipulative thing to say. Right. And I think is just, I mean, how many times do we come on here and criticize jockeys for passive riding? Right. I mean, this is race riding to me. This is how you're supposed to ride. Right. I know there are people out there. That's what I think. And what was it? Was it the best strategy to get second? No. Was it the best strategy to try to win the race? Probably. That was the horse you had to beat. You hope you win that duel, and you hope the Keen Ice hangs. And it's a huge thing if they win the Travers. So Lezcano, who we know is one of the few you might call an aggressive rider, he rode aggressively, and if I had bet Frosted, I would not have a problem with it. I say it all the time. Especially if you're like me and you'll often criticize riders for being passive, then or maybe we'll even say, and let's even give the critics one thing. Let's even say, just as a thought experiment, it was a mistake and he did too much and he needed to be more subtle and push him and give his horse a little bit better of a chance. I don't know if I buy it, but let's just say that for a second. I can't be on here all the time criticizing riders for sins of passivity and then also criticize them for sins of aggression. I'd much rather see them try to be aggressive and have that not work out than to just everybody grab and run around the track for whatever reason. So you're not going to hear me criticize the ride at all. I will say this, and I firmly believe this. Tell me if you think I'm crazy. Joel Rosario rides Frosted, as was the plan before whatever it was, one race before the Travers. I think American Pharoah wins.
Yeah, two races before.
I think Pharoah wins if Rosario's up. True or false?
We'll never know, and I've thought about that, and that was actually a question that I was going to ask you on the podcast, but you've already come out and said what you think. You're probably right. I would say I doubt Joel Rosario would have done that or been that aggressive, not least of which because he's a different type of rider, but because he is more familiar with the horse. And you've got a situation where an hour before the race, basically, you get a jockey announced on the horse who's never, I don't have his PPs, but I don't believe Lezcano has ever been on Frosted before. He certainly didn't have time to do the tape work of watching all the replays of all the different runners in the race to figure out who the other speed was and who's the closers, and which is what I imagine in a $1.6 million race a lot of the jockeys are going to do, or their agents are going to do, and the trainers are going to do. There's going to be a lot more preparation than what you had with Jose Lezcano getting the mount on Frosted the way he did. So yeah, I think it was I would imagine it was a case of, all right, I'm on this horse. He is one of the main rivals against a very legitimate horse who seems to have a pace advantage. I'm going to not let him get clear. I'm not going to let him have an easy lead. And I'm going to ride the race to win. And there was probably less, maybe a little bit more than that, but probably not much more than that. And that's kind of what it boiled down to, especially considering he was not familiar with the horse. It wasn't the plan originally.
I expected something like that to happen a lot more in the Belmont. And one of the reasons why the Belmont, why he was the winner every yard in the Belmont was that nothing like that happened. Right. So I guess on that level, I was a little just personally, I didn't expect such an aggressive ride just because the same horses had run against each other. And I guess you could say materiality tried, but he wasn't really a horse at that point and couldn't even sniff it. That gets also back to the point of if it was really the A game of the Pharoah, would it have even mattered? Which I think is a valid point. But as much as many people, including myself, have talked about riders trying to get, I don't think this was riders trying to get Smarty Jones beat in the Belmont. I do believe that happened. The way that race played out, there were some completely illogical things from a tactical point of view that definitely led to that horse not winning. An event which I'm surprised to hear myself say this, but I'm now, with everything we've gone through with Pharoah and everything, I'm just as glad that all went down the way it did that day, because I feel like the way it went down this year was just felt more, I don't know, just somehow felt more right to me. But this
everything
was
leading up to this, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This was not that. I think I just think Rosario, while he may have employed similar tactics of not letting him get away, I don't think he would have been. He's just so much more patient and more of a grabber. He certainly wasn't going to be leaning on him in the stretch like that. Lezcano. Right. He took race riding right to the edge.
Yes.
I'm not saying that Victor has 0 point. I just thought it was not what you want to be saying necessarily right when the race was over. I guess
Oh,
that
it
was
was,
my.
yeah. It was absolutely a heat of the moment kind of statement that I would imagine, I don't know, I haven't heard, but I would imagine he regrets a little bit after the fact. Not least of which because he's criticizing a peer, and he probably doesn't want that same type of criticism landing on his head when he's running a race where he's just trying to win. But, you know, obviously he was disappointed. Obviously he was upset. Obviously he felt like there were, especially if he really did feel like the whip hit American Pharoah a number of times. But yeah, I mean,
didn't really see that.
I didn't either. But you know, I did see a couple. It's really hard, even on the high def. It's really hard to see with that sort of stuff.
He did have his elbow.
You know, and they're swinging. You know, who knows what happens? You know, I mean, I even. I think on the podcast, or maybe we talked about it before the podcast, I was making a case that the whip of Iatapa's, I would think Joe Talamo in the Breeders' Cup Distaff hit, or someone's whip hit Iotapa on the head as she was trying to make her run. You know, it's hard to see. You never know. I mean, unless you're right there riding the horse, it's really hard to say even on high def.
One thing I will say that I think the head-on reveals is that during the little tete-a-tete, when it does get physical there, while Lezcano is, you know, kind of leaning on him, he's also getting out a little bit. It exaggerates it. I just think he was really, I mean, the bottom line is I think he was riding to win. Speaking of riding tactics in the race, how terrific was Castellano on Keen Ice? I mean,
it was amazing.
If he had done what DeSormo had done with that horse in the past, or even what DeSormo did with Texas Red in that race, sort of going unnecessarily wide, I'm not sure that horse wins. I mean, that might be another thing. Maybe you could say not only if Rosario is up, but maybe if Castellano isn't up, maybe you get a different result there. That's a thing in racing. It's a great teacher about handicapping is if you ever read about chaos theory. I don't know if that's in your if it's something you've ever spent much time with, but this idea that these little changes, sometimes even seemingly insignificant changes, can lead to massive differences and crazy things happening. The idea that the sort of stereotypical one is the butterfly flapping its wings, halfway around the world causes a hurricane. Right. And I think, you know, when you think about these little tactical differences with the jockeys, it's just another laboratory. It shows how horse racing can just be like the world's perfect laboratory for chaos theory, in my opinion.
I'm not going to disagree with you, you know, because we've certainly seen, not just in this race, but in other races where it's, you know, things happen that you couldn't script on paper. You know, and these are animals and these are humans that have to make decisions on the fly, and sometimes they make fantastic decisions, and sometimes they make decisions that they regret. We've heard jockeys come out and say, you know, I rode that race horribly, and you know, but I think you're absolutely right. Javier could not have ridden Keen Ice any better, and it shows why he is not just an Eclipse Award winner, but he is a sure lock for the Hall of Fame.
Man, he does such a good job there, just keeping the horse in touch and being able to get his opportunity and pounce. And like you said, I don't think it's some fluke. He is a good horse. I just think he probably ran the third best race, the way that I see the way the Travers played out. That said, Frosted with that, the effort was so big, and I wonder if he'll ever be the same at this point.
I don't know. I know. We'll see. I mean, I think he. Where do you go from here? I guess with a horse like Frosted, if I were in control of his destiny, I wouldn't target a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic. You know, maybe you target the Breeders' Cup Mile or something else, or maybe you just don't even target the Breeders' Cup this year, and you know, you look to next year when you don't have an American Pharoah to face. But, you know, I think he's one that maybe is in need of a confidence boost.
Yeah, that's not crazy. I mean, the Breeders' Cup, I don't think he doesn't fit exactly, especially depending on what ends up happening with American Pharoah, but he a little bit easier spot would probably make him look all the better. I don't know what the plans are with him for his stud career, and if it's going to be starting next year or they have another year. There's a lot of different factors, I guess, that go into it. That's something you'll have to check in the pages of Daily Racing Form and through your DRF Plus subscription to all the excellent reporting coming out of New York from the likes of Dave Grenning, and I'm sure there'll be reports soon as to what the plan is for Frosted. How about the plan for American Pharoah? What do you think is going to happen? With the big horse next, Mike?
I think there was another really strong heat of the moment statement coming from Amit Zayat, where he said, I would retire the horse. I completely regret it. Look, he seemed obviously overcome with emotion and probably unprepared to deal with the potentiality of a loss.
For real, yeah.
And and so in those moments, you say things that in the a day or two later, you maybe don't feel completely. But I just hope he goes back to the same sporting style that led him to want American Pharoah to race at Saratoga. We've got this great horse who is at the top of his game, who is we already know is not going to run as a 4-year-old, and give the fans an opportunity, and even as yourself, this is probably the one chance he's going to have in his lifetime to have a horse like this, which is why he only sold a part of him instead of selling him in total, because he still wanted to be involved in this level of greatness. I'm hoping, and I'm relatively confident that we will see him in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Well, Bob Baffert's quotes. Baffert is one of these guys. You can he'll say things, and you can kind of read between the lines. And you could reading between the lines. Obviously, he didn't want to, at first anyway, he didn't want to come here. I actually thought it was great after the race that, while in his head he's thinking, darn it, I should have gone to Parks. That's not what he says. He talks about how glad he was, and I think he appreciated what it meant to the fans, and I think he appreciated the fans' appreciation of him. But and going forward, even after those Zayat comments that you mentioned, I think you're right, he was ill prepared for, and you probably don't have to take too literally. The Baffert quotes seem to me like he's really excited about the idea, assuming everything goes well with the horse, to train him up to the Breeders' Cup. And originally I didn't think that was the best plan. It seemed like maybe a little, I'd rather have 6 weeks than the 8. I would have, and that's the thing about that Parks race, especially in hindsight. Again, I didn't want him to go there. I'm not saying I told you so or anything, because it's kind of the opposite. But you look at it now, and it's like, well, that would have been 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks, and one fewer ship. But Baffert sounds like he wants to do it to me, and so I think as long as the horse it comes through everything okay, we're going to too. I'm really sincerely hoping that. I don't think he makes himself less valuable at stud, even if things don't go well at the Classic. I think the horse is already worth a ton. I think you could make the argument if he won the Travers and won the BCBC, maybe they could try to jack the stud fee a little more.
Hold up, Pete. You said the BCBC. Is he also going to be competing in that? Because I know you're the tournament guy. That would be a real scoop.
I don't think that he's eligible. I'll be honest with you.
Right.
I don't think that we've yet to have an equine participant.
He would have to play himself in the Classic, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, the rules. That's how the rules work, pretty much. If you're a jockey agent or a trainer who want to play, so I would assume that the rule would hold the same for the equines themselves. But that's amazing. Too much. There's so many tournaments on the brain, and just so many getting just a little bit fried from all the craziness up here is what leads.
Fair
to
enough.
that.
I'll give you that one.
Yeah, but you follow my meaning, and it'll be really cool if we can get it to happen. We'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic.
I agree with you 100% because even if he finishes off the board in the Breeders' Cup Classic, I don't think it affects anything at all in terms of the stud career. And if the horse is sound and showing that he wants to run and training forwardly, then I'm confident that we haven't seen his last race.
I sure hope so. I sure hope you're right about that. Some of the things that led it to sound like it had some credence, the Zayat comments, were Victor talking about how he sweated up going to the gate and he'd never done that before. That was a little worrisome. Mm-hmm. But, you know, between the ship, and others have pointed out too, again, this is kind of the worst kind of second guessing, but I'll just throw it out there since we're having this detailed conversation, that maybe the gallop in front of the 10 to 15,000, whoever it was, on Friday morning, maybe that got the juices going a little bit too much for him, and maybe that was somehow a factor in him maybe not being the A-plus horse. I don't know if I buy it or not, but I think it's worthy of at least throwing out there to people who are curious. I mean, I think when you see something as dramatic as that, and in some ways as unexpected as that, I know as a fan, you want people to talk about it and just talk about every angle and maybe explain some possibilities or explain what they think is nonsense versus what might be right. So in the spirit of that, I'll throw that idea out there that I heard that, I'm not sure if I buy is maybe a little bit worthy of consideration and maybe something they would have done differently hindsight 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fair. You make a good point. I mean, if a horse is, even if they're just galloping and they see a crowd like that cheering them on, you know, they think it's go time, you know, and who knows if it took too much out of them. I don't know. Just
mentally, perhaps. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I buy it, but and it was such a magical moment, and I'm so glad they did it. I took Perrin over. Because I thought taking her, I wanted to take her to she's 2.5. I wanted to take her to the Belmont. Too long of a day, no question. Thought about the Travers, maybe trying to come over for a little bit, but it's a bit of even with the 50,000 cap, which I do think was probably the right move, given how loony the place was even at that. It just seemed like it might be a little too much. So that was sort of the perfect opportunity. And I mean, the other great thing about that speaks to this horse and his place and how special he is it was great to see all these horsemen in the boxes watching. How often do horsemen get a chance to really go and watch another horse work? It was really cool. So I'm not saying, they shouldn't have done that, tisk tisk. I'm just saying, hey, you know, if you're deconstructing, maybe that's something you do different.
Right. No, it's an interesting point, and it's one I hadn't thought of before. But you know, I don't know. I just really hope, maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I really hope we see him again in the Breeders' Cup Classic, because how amazing would that race be? It seems like it's shaping up. If everybody stays sound and healthy, it seems like it's shaping up to be one for the ages, really.
It really could be. What is the latest news on Beholder? I haven't been paying nearly enough attention to the West Coast news being here up in Saratoga.
I think they're still targeting the Classic for her, from what I've heard. I haven't heard anything differently, and you know, we'll see. Maybe they'll get one race in her, just probably an easy prep against the fillies, and then send her down. I don't know. We'll see. I don't see any reason why she wouldn't go there. Although, you know, the news that she is going to be staying in training until next year could be both positive and negative in a sense, at least in terms of this year's Breeders' Cup Classic, because the pessimist in you could think, well, maybe they're doing that because next year is the year that they want to target the Breeders' Cup Classic, when they're not going to have the Pharaohs, maybe not the Honor Codes, maybe not as salty a bunch to take on the boys again in a race like the Classic with the shipping. It's back home in Santa Anita next year, so maybe the pessimist in you might think, take the easy path this year, next year is the one to target for the Classic. I don't know.
That's not crazy. Matt Bernier made a similar point when I saw him. We hung out a little bit after the races on Saturday, and he mentioned that, and that kind of makes a lot of sense. This is going to be potentially, you know, you never know, and I almost shouldn't say it out loud, but as you point out, a really historic running of the Breeders' Cup, and it's certainly not good. It's going to be ridiculously difficult. I guess the flip side of that is, gosh, if she were to win the thing, while it's still not going to make her horse of the year, it would truly be yet another accomplishment for the ages on her, resume. So I guess it depends on why they're doing it and what's going on. But it'll be it's going to be great to follow.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it probably wouldn't make her horse of the year, but it might make her certainly one of the best fillies that ever raced, which is odd to say.
Exactly.
You've got one of the best fillies who've ever raced putting in one of the best filly and mare years ever, and it's still not good enough for the horse of the year.
Somebody will vote for her, that's for sure.
Well, yeah,
but
sure.
It's
I could see the case. It's sort of like, go back to baseball for a second. It's sort of like how Juan Marichal never won the Cy Young, and you look at the years that he had. It's like that. He's facing Sandy Koufax, or he's facing Bob Gibson, or he's facing these really like one for the ages type performances. And sometimes it happens that way.
Yeah, the year-end awards, they're fun. I'll tell you what, I'll be very honest. I used to pay a lot less attention to them before we did the podcast and before I worked at DRF. Being a DRF person accomplished two things as far as year-end awards. For one, I got to vote for them, and I took it very seriously because of that. But also, they're really fun to talk about. It gives podcast hosts and radio hosts a lot of fodder. I think sometimes it doesn't really matter as much as we make it sound like it matters because it's so fun to talk about. So, but that said, I'm not gonna stop anytime soon. I have two more little things on the Pharoah, and then we can decide if we want to touch on some of the other action. Unless you had more. One, I wanted to make it very clear when I think I made a face when we were talking about the Zayat emotional reaction after. Talking about retirement after the race, I want to make it clear, no judgment there. I do believe after I pulled myself up from the floor, literally, after the Travers, I looked at Susan, I said, I think that's it for me, as if I'm not going to bed anymore. And we know that's not true. So I'm not being judgmental about it. I just want to make that point very clear. And then the last thing I wanted to say about the race was that true or false, fourth biggest upset in the history of Saratoga?
Wow, I hadn't thought in those terms.
I think you can make a case. I mean, Man of War, Jim Dandy, Man of War and upset rather.
Right.
That's got to be
Gallant
that's
Fox
got to be
and
at the
Jim
top
Dandy.
of the list.
Yeah.
Gallant Fox and Jim Dandy, Secretariat and Onion,
and
Keen Ice American Pharoah. I mean, Keen Ice wasn't 100-1, but neither was Onion.
No,
I actually don't even remember what price Onion was. I'll have to look that up. But I think we're going to come to look at it in those. These are races that happened almost 100 years ago in one instance, and we're still talking about it today. I think that could be the case with this. I still love the horse, and I'm glad I got to see it, and I'm excited to see the possible redemption storyline. Not that he really needs to be redeemed, but the storybook ending, the Seabiscuit type ending that could be going down in a couple of months out in Lexington. I'll be there, and I think other folks should, if they haven't already, start figuring out their plans of how they're going to get there. It's going to be something special.
Yeah, so one last thing I will say about the race and about why I think we likely haven't seen his last race is because even though it was the heat of the moment, they felt, we made a mistake and we want to retire him, I think they also want him to go out a winner. Yeah. I think they don't want this to be the way he goes out because they know they've got such a special horse. They want to give him the chance to go out on top.
I love that, and I hope he's, I think if we can get that Pharoah that I believe is the A-game Pharoah, I think he can take on all comers, even a tough older horse like an Honor Code or a freak of a filly like Beholder. I think that I think that on his best day, he's truly a talent who's capable of, even his first time against elders, hitting that mark. And if not, hey, you know what? He's already given us plenty. I don't think any horses. Makes me crazy when people say this horse owes me money or whatever they say sometimes. It's to me the most muggish, terrible thing you could say because these horses owe us absolutely nothing ever, and especially a horse like American Pharoah owes us absolutely nothing. So if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But boy, what a story if he could get the job done.
Right. No, I agree. All right. Well, we had not just the Travers, but we had a whole pick six full of Grade 1 stakes. And we had another Grade 2 just on top of that in case you didn't get enough. So you were there. Let's do kind of speed round. What was, aside from the Travers, aside from American Pharoah, Keen Ice, and all those storylines that we've already talked about, what was the most impressive performance you saw?
Flincher leaps to mind. I think that horse is really awesome. I even talked last week a little bit on the pod. I was worried about his grindy, how grindy he was, and maybe he'd be too far back and not fast enough in a burst. Well, they trained him really well for the race, and the workout reports indicated that they were working on sharpening him up, and he was in touch the whole way, and he just had a ton left. I'll say in general, there's a lot of European horses. If they start training and riding them more like that, they're going to even win more of our graded stakes than they do already. I just thought that was a really good training job, a terrific riding job, and a really cool horse who's just a handful.
We didn't mention the buyer for Keen Ice. It came back 106. The buyer for Flincher was 112, which I haven't checked. I believe that is the top buyer on turf this year.
I would think so. I haven't seen anything up near there that springs to mind. What about you, Mike? Which race would you say had the most impressive performance, the big race?
There are three that come to mind. Flincher is one of them. Private Zone, certainly.
Terrific. Big tactical edge, but he was still awesome.
Yeah, the one that I might actually label is Run Happy, to be honest.
Yeah, who you picked right on the podcast, right?
Yes.
Good work.
I didn't know what kind of horse we had. I just knew we had a really crazy, talented horse that seemed like he was pretty loopy. And I didn't know if he was going to put it all together on Saturday, but boy, did he ever. And came within a few ticks of breaking the track record. The first time he runs against graded stakes, well, aside from the Lecomte, which was 2 turns, the first time he sprints against graded stakes horses, he nearly breaks the track record at Saratoga for 7 furlongs, and without Lasix.
I thought that was a great prediction you made about Maria Burrell, the trainer there, that if Run Happy runs like you thought he was going to, her Twitter following would explode, and sure enough it did. That was a good subtle prediction you made, I thought.
Well, thanks. So, it's probably the only time at Saratoga in a graded stakes, let alone a Grade 1, I've ever seen an Ellis Park exacta.
That's right.
Where you had the top 2 finishers coming out of races from Ellis. So maybe there's another time, but I can't remember it.
Certainly not in a Grade 1.
Yeah.
So
and that's the kind of performance. He got a 113 buyer. Private Zone in the next race going the same distance got a buyer of 105. So my question for you, and maybe I should have asked it before I even gave you the buyer figures, but even still. 2 questions. You can answer it however you want. You can answer one, you can answer both. If they had decided to wait 1 race later and Run Happy against the Elders in not the King's Bishop, but in the Forego, who wins? And then the other question, you can either answer that one, or you could answer 2 months from now, all things being equal, they both show up in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and they don't stretch. I don't know what the plans are. I don't know if the plans are to stretch Private Zone out to the dirt mile or not, because it's 6 furlongs, right, in the sprint. So all things being equal in the 6 furlong distance, who wins?
6 furlongs I'm not prepared to answer. I'd have to do more work. But my gut is that the extended sprint is more Private Zone's game. And with that in mind, it might be the kind of thing where he was so loose, he probably could have run a little bit faster earlier. Sometimes when you have a race with, not that it was super slow, right, up front. I don't have the fractions in front of me, but
I do. If you want me to,
Oh, yeah. Well, I really love the flow figure, but if you have the fraction, that gives me something.
So Run Happy was 22.43, 44.54, 108.17, and then the final time 120.54. Private Zone was 22.67, 45.10, 108.53, and the final time of 121.09.
Well, you might not think it from how I'm talking about how I think Pharoah can go and win the Breeders' Cup Classic if he's right, but I'm generally a big believer in how difficult it is for 3-year-olds to face elder horses, especially for the first time. It's not really based on any math; it's just based on my own sort of view and from watching races for a long time. So I gotta give Private Zone the nod, despite the difference in speed figures there. And we'll have to see if Run Happy trains on. Sometimes horses who've shown a tendency to be a little nutty, it's harder for them to put races together. But he certainly showed up on that day, and kudos to you for picking him. Did you also have him in Public Handicapper?
I didn't. I put him second in Public Handicapper. I put him second in Public Handicapper because I started liking another horse, Loose on the Town, who I don't know if you watched the tape on his first 2 races.
Haven't no.
You should go back and watch them. He won his debut pretty impressively. He's a Brian Lynch horse, and then ran second in a good race, which actually got flattered the next day when Waco came back and won at a pretty big price on Sunday. But part of the reason why I liked Loose on the Town was he's a horse in both of his races coming into the King's Bishop. He ran really well, and he never changed leads. And for a young horse who's a little green, who does that, I don't like a horse like Firing Line who professionally change leads each time, and then in a race like the Derby doesn't. Going forward, I take that as a negative. But when you've got a young, inexperienced horse that's maybe a little green that doesn't change leads, if you can anticipate that they might, then there could be a huge forward move coming. And that's partly why both that and the expected price, which they actually went off a little more, Run Happy went off at 11.3 to 1. Loose on the Town went off 24 to 1. I expected to get a better price on Loose on the Town, which is why I put him on top. But in real life, I used all 3, Limousine Liberal as well as my A's in my pick 4. I placed win bets on all of them because I was feeling I was getting good value on all of them. I did an exacta box with all 3, so I treated them essentially equally, in my opinion. But just because of the odds, I put Loose on the Town on top.
That's the thing about the Public Handicapper website and being a public handicapper in general. You don't have final odds. You don't have the option of putting the 3 next to each other on the top line. You got to go 1, 2, 3. So it's these things happen. So is that do we have a time for anything else, or I feel like we're about at an hour now. What do you think?
We are we started a little late. We're about at an hour. I think that pretty much covers it. We don't really have time to talk about Sheer Drama's win or Unbridled Forever's win. The one thing I will note, and I don't know if you noticed this, the chart for the Forgo is wrong. And it's rare that you see these mistakes, and maybe they will fix it. But Private Zone's running line has him as a post position of 7, and at the start has him 11th. And then first by a length and first by 2 lengths. He broke on top, and in the comment says he outbroke the field and maintained his advantage.
Yeah, I think that's like a typo. The 11th was supposed to be first. They hit the 1 key in extra time or something.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, they don't have 2.
Weird.
They don't have 2 1s in there. They have Salutos Amigos as breaking first. They have Big Beast as breaking second. And they have Private Zone as breaking 11th. The only one breaking worse was Run for Logistics. So, again, maybe it gets fixed. But it's one of those, if you don't watch the races, and his next race comes up and you see start 11th and then first, you might think, wow, he broke slow and rushed up and still ran away. It wasn't the case. So.
No, that's a
the
good
only other
point.
thing
That's a
I'll
good point. Yeah, not a lot. I wish, we don't really have too much time to talk about those other races, but I feel like in both cases they were sort of, I mean, not to take anything away from the races, but just great setups and horses who did the business. I wouldn't have had a lot to add even if we had a lot more time.
The one thing I will mention real briefly about the Personal Ensign is I feel like that race, even though it was only 9 furlongs, was run very similar to the Travers. Very similar to the Travers.
Tactically,
yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Where you had the 2 horses, in Johnny V and Javier felt like I need to beat this other horse, and that was the race. And it set it up. And Joe Bravo, take nothing away from Sheer Drama, who's a very good mare, and Joe Bravo rode that race perfectly and took advantage of what he saw going on up front. But you've got a case where Untappable and Stop Charging Maria were both being ridden like we just need to beat the other one.
Yeah. And they kind of did, because if either one of them was alone, that one wins. So it's again, just like in the Travers. I mean, that's just the way you're supposed to ride races.
Exactly, and you can't fault that. The pay, we do talk wagering a little bit. The payouts are really interesting in that. In a 6-horse field where you had the 3rd choice come in first, the 4th choice at 6-1 come in second, and then the 2nd choice at 2-1 come in third. Just by beating Stop Charging Maria at 3-2, the $2 try paid $152 in a 6-horse field.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah.
Not the most surprising wagering note on the day. I still can't believe that the pick 6 didn't get hit. I'm in disbelief about that. But a $152 try in a 6-horse field is also fairly surprising.
With the pretty logical, to some extent. I mean, the 2 long shots didn't hit the board, so it wasn't.
Right.
It was. Anyway, that's the last.
You just
I'll
had to
say
key
about
one of the others and get lucky getting the favorite 4th.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. All right, sir. Well, as always, it's been a pleasure. And next week, I guess we'll do this, and then maybe the end of next week we'll see you in person, huh?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, what I'm hoping are we not doing a show on Friday?
Well, yeah, of course, but you'll still be remote then.
I'll be up here Friday, and then for next week, the early week one, I should be hopefully back in the city. Maybe we'll have to do Wednesday instead of Tuesday. But
either way.
But who knows? I may come back. I may come back Labor Day. And then we could even do something on Tuesday possibly. So it should be.
Well, good.
Be good.
Well, it's been a pleasure. We could probably go on another hour just talking about those other races, but
or even going back to the Travers. I could relive my. I could relive my pick 6 debacle. Sometimes in this game you just feel like a mush, and when you need the 1-4 Triple Crown champion for 9,000, and then you watch that, that's pretty much how you feel like a mush.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, I don't know what your investment is, but you could look at it from the standpoint of I put in X amount of dollars to turn the 1-4 favorite into 50 to 1, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1. What I don't think it was a $9 investment, but you get my point. I mean, from a betting standpoint, that's the kind of thing you can question and you can look back, but those are the types of things that you're looking to do in playing and singling in a horse like a pick 6.
Absolutely. No, that's an optimistic and not incorrect way of looking at it, and it's the kind of thing that's very hard to do on your own and becomes a lot more possible when you write up the tickets the way we did in our ticket maker webinar last week.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, I'll mention that again. Anybody can see any of the webinars archived. If you just go to drf.com/YouTube, they're all posted there. Even though we talked about the Travers Pick 4, which obviously you can't play anymore, the strategy that Jonathan gave and that you and I gave too in terms of our thoughts about it as well is incredibly evergreen, and I think will resonate.
We barely talked handicapping. It was really all about strategy, and it actually surprised me how little it was about handicapping in a good way. It just, I think it makes it more evergreen and gives people something to go back to.
It's the sort of thing that if you listening out there or watching us on DRF Live are at all even interested about playing multi-race wagers, it's the kind of strategy that it will make you a better wagerer, I guarantee, just by watching that.
That's what everybody's saying, and I'm not going to argue with them.
All right, and the other thing I will mention is we talked about webinars. We've got another one on Thursday. It's you and I going to be talking about the sire snapshot and the sibling summary tools in Formulator. I got some fun stuff. We'll talk and we'll come up with some interesting ways to use that. And it's also ultimately another tool in your arsenal to help you handicap races where you might not have a very strong opinion. So it's.
Will we be going over specific races, or will it be more of a product demo?
No, we'll demo the product by using particular races coming up in the near future,
Awesome.
either at Saratoga or part of where I like, and I'm sure we all play tracks that are maybe not the top circuits, but one of the things I like to do is if you're playing Delaware, you're playing Laurel, you're playing even Kentucky Downs opens this week, which I'm very excited about.
Great track. Those guys do a great job out there.
Yeah, some of these tracks, the Saratoga ones, if you've got a horse debuting and they're half to Ironicus, like we had yesterday, you're going to see that in a closer look, or you're going to see that because people are aware of that just because, it's a big horse at a big track that's debuting with a known sibling. At the smaller tracks, you may have horses like that debuting, and there's no closer
Nobody knows
looks.
who they are.
There's no race advances, and you get an edge by having access to this kind of information that you get through.
That's a great point.
So that's what we'll be doing. I'll probably use 2 or 3 different races as examples to just show some of the things that you can use, the pedigree information, just to make you smarter.
Love it. I'm excited to be a part of it, and folks should definitely go on to drf.com now and sign up for it. Submit questions to us, and we'll do that then, and then we'll be back here on Friday to talk about some races.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks again, Pete.
Right.
And do your work here.
Absolutely. Until the next time, may you win all your photos.